When you share your food, you share your heart. So what's on your table this holiday season? Save on your festive feast at Kroger with delicious deals on all the holiday classics. Or wow the crowd with something new, like a quinoa stuffed butternut squash. It's sure to add a pop of color to your spread. How about a sweet potato casserole with a crunchy oat streusel topping, made with care for the sweet tooth and the savory tooth? With Kroger, fill your table with love and watch as your guests' hearts get as full as their bellies. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
This is a mini meditation guided by Bombas. Repeat after me. I'm comfy. I'm cozy. I have 0 blisters on my toes. And that's because I wear Bombas, the softest socks, underwear, and t-shirts that give back. One purchased equals one donated. Now go to bombas.com/listen and use code LISTEN for 20% off your first purchase. That's bombas.com/listen and use code LISTEN at checkout.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Dying Time is here. That's right, we're talking about 1994's Interview with the Vampire on Kill by Kill. Well, greetings and salutations, Internet. It's your old pal, Patrick Hamilton, coming to you once again from New Orleans. That's a terrible accent, and I won't be attempting it again. This is the Kill by Kill podcast, where we are dedicated to celebrating the least discussed component of any horror film, the characters. And we're going to unpack all the goriest of details of 1994's version of Interview with the Vampire in the hopes that an undead bloodsucker's untimely end is just the beginning of the jokes we might make at their expense. And as always, there's only one person I trust to disrobe me on stage in front of a scandalized Paris audience. The one, the only, Gina Radcliffe. How are you doing today, Gina?
You know what? I probably would do that.
If requested. It's part of the show. It's not sexual between you and me. This is just part of the show.
Yeah, I mean, this is showbiz, baby. I mean,
if you can't step up in this place at this time, perhaps Paris Grand Guignol stage work is not for you.
No.
Okay. Well, I don't want to scare you, Gina, but we are not alone. That's right. We have a special guest. Now, you may know him as an actor, writer, director with credits for movies like The Adjustment Bureau and TV shows like Law and Order SVU. But his latest project is the 4th season of Greg in LA, and it premieres in just 2 days from now on December 8th. The one, the only Gregory Lay. How are you doing today, Gregory?
Oh, I'm doing really, really well, Patrick. Thank you so much for having me. Hi, Gina. How are you?
Good. How are you?
We're so excited to have you on board for our discussion of vampires and interviewing them and us interviewing you along the way. And I guess my first question is generally the question I have anytime we have a guest on the show. And that is, when was the first time you, Gregory, watched Interview with the Vampire?
Well, in 1994, I was 14 years old, and that was during 1990 to 2000. That was a decade where anything out in the theaters, any big release, I saw it. So I remember being 14, very specifically hearing the ads on the radio and then anticipating going to see it and then seeing it. I remember it was a very epic experience.
Excellent. And what part of the country were you residing at that point?
Paramus, New Jersey.
Paramus, New Jersey. What an interesting garden spot. Gina's a Jersey girl.
Oh, yeah, Gina, which part?
Southern New Jersey, actually, right outside of Atlantic City.
Oh, all right. I make my way down there all the time.
And Gina, when was the first time you laid eyes on Interview with the Vampire?
I, too, saw this in the theater. My boyfriend and I at the time decided we were going to read all of Anne Rice's books, including the pornography. And this movie happened to be coming out around the time we were doing that. So, and I was already a big fan of vampire movies in general. Yeah. So this was probably an opening weekend of viewing for me.
I saw this at the Burbank. It's probably 14 at that point. That's mowed down at this point, and now it's like a pizza shop and apartment buildings, and they built a whole new theater next door. But at the time, I believe that is where I saw it. I saw it with friends. I was not necessarily an Anne Rice person. I had not read the books to date. that happened later in the 90s. So I came into this fresh. I just knew it was vampire fun. So that's what I came into it, looking for. Now, I have some production history notes that I want to yak out here before we get into the character stuff. This isn't a movie that we really need to spell out the plot for, since it's a pretty standard story of losing your wife, meeting a hot guy, turning into a vampire, seeing statues look at you, burning shit when things don't go your way, moving to Europe, finding a different hot guy, and spilling the tea to a rando. Tale as old as time.
And also, having a child to save your relationship.
Right. That's a big one. And it always works out. You should do it today. So let's get into the backstory here. Now, the Interview with the Vampire was written originally by Anne Rice. It was published in 1976. And this needs to be said. We'll get to some jokes later on, but this is important to note. Rice wrote this book in the aftermath of losing her 6-year-old daughter to cancer, which is all kinds of horrible. And that raw grief is woven into nearly every passage of the novel. And it's very evident when you look at the plot of the film that what she's trying to work out and why. But it catches readers right away. The film rights are snapped up by Paramount immediately, where it kind of languishes in version after version in development hell for nearly 20 years. It's passed around from producer to producer and eventually lands at Warner Brothers. And the screenplay is adapted by Rice and a few other people. It's done multiple times. Some of them show a lot of reverence to the source material. Others are using it as a jumping off point. Rice at one point takes a crack at the script where she gender swaps Louie into a woman with the idea that it would then be easier to get made with a traditional male and female pairing. And she pitches to the studio at the time, Cher as the lead. Now, I want to ask both of you, would this movie be better with Cher in the Louie role?
Well, I mean, are we talking just because she would certainly give a more energetic performance than than Brad Pitt.
There would be a lot more woo in the middle of
I think there'd be a little more juice to it.
Yes.
Sure, why not?
Man, I'm really trying to picture that. What was she making around that time? Where was she sort of in the cultural?
Well, this is post Oscar for her for Moonstruck.
So
she is a legit fucking movie star at this point.
She was believable. I mean, she did The Witches of Eastwick. She was perfectly, plausible in that role.
Now, would they keep the hair curly? Or would they straighten it?
That's how I'm picturing it. I'm picturing it all curly.
Just has a massive curly hair.
Yeah. It's just, her status, who she is, the fact that she is such a big celebrity. It would have been a completely different movie, right? I'm not going to say it would have been better or worse, but it would have been something completely different. We would have known it was Cher, and that would have been different than a Brad Pitt that was, not early on, but somewhat, right?
Disregard the fact that Cher was cast at one point. At a different point, they were attempting to make this as a rock musical. So,
oh boy,
there's something to consider.
The costumes that would fit.
Cher was so inspired by the possibility of this never realized film that she wrote a song called Lovers Forever out of the experience, and it later became a dance pop single in 2013. So look that up, everybody. Warner Brothers eventually approached Neil Jordan after his breakout Oscar success with The Crying Game. And he looked at Rice's script adaptation and was like, I don't know. Reads the book and is like, now this book is fucking awesome. That script should be more like this. I don't know why she changed it. So he goes back and adds more book details into Rice's script. And that's because it primarily comes from Rice and he's just adding things back in. He doesn't get that written by credit, that screenwriting credit. And this was not the first time Neil Jordan had kind of dipped into gothic horror. He had his gothic werewolf fairy tale, The Company of Wolves, in the early 80s. Gina, I know you've seen it. Gregory, have you?
I have not. I've not seen that.
Certifiably weird. Gina?
I would say definitely make it a double feature with this, because while Company of Wolves is much more fantastical, you can see there's some vibe sharing happening with that.
He knows how to set the sort of mood for what it is. I will warn people that Company of Wolves is much more of a fairy tale than it is werewolf heavy. There's plenty of werewolves, but keep in mind the phrase fairy tale, because that is going to be paramount to you enjoying what happens.
And also, there also is a pretty gnarly transformation scene.
Yes.
That unfortunately, the VHS cover artwork kind of gives it away.
Yes. So if you have that VHS cover, don't look at it before you pop it into your combo TV VHS player that we all own.
I just want to point out that it's interesting that you said that Jordan actually added more from the book to the script, because usually you find with book to screen adaptations, they gut it and strip away as much as possible. It's rare to see. So it's like, no, more of the book. Let's bring more of that.
Yeah, I mean, there were certain things that she had streamlined down in order to sort of get it into that 90 to 105 sweet spot. And when he reads it, it's like, I think you're taking out some of the important elements of this that really make it pop. And he makes sure to put that stuff back into the ultimate screenplay, and I think to the film's benefit. Nearly everyone involved in this over the years wanted a different person to play what is arguably not listed and not conceivably the main character, but the linchpin of the piece, and that is the vampire Lestat. Rice wrote the character thinking about French hottie Alain Delon, and if you've never seen a picture of him, look at him in his 20s, and you're like, holy shit, I could shave using his chin. It is razor sharp, baby. But he's way too old by 1994 to actually make that happen. During the 80s in development, Rutger Hauer, John Malkovich, Peter Weller, Jeremy Irons, Alexander Goodenough were all pitched for the role, but none of those versions of the movie were ever realized.
I also heard Julian Sands and Sting at some point.
Yes. I mean, they're all a vibe. You can kind of see it work for all of them, especially the Rutger Hauer and Julian Sands of it all. Like, that seems like very much a sweet spot. But for whatever reason, well, actually, I know the reason. Paramount balked at Julian Sands because he was kind of starting out, and they didn't feel he was leading as high enough a status to make the two-hander with him work. And despite this reasoning, Neil Jordan originally cast Daniel Day-Lewis, who was hot off his My Left Foot Oscar nomination and a romantic lead performance in Last of the Mohicans in 1992. And so now I would like to, Julian Sands you can absolutely see, but Daniel Day-Lewis is a very interesting pull for Lestat at this point in his career. I mean, he knows how to rock long hair.
I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it.
Oh, 100%. I mean, it absolutely would have been fantastic, but it most definitely would have, it's very possible to change the trajectory of his career, I feel like. Yeah. Having a Hollywood role like that, not necessarily in a bad way, but he kind of kept that mystique to him inevitably that led him to playing those deep character roles. So that would have been interesting.
But at the same time, I feel like it would have lost some of its camp value. Because he's like not a super humorous actor.
Yes, that's a good point.
So I think it would have lost some of that aspect to it.
But we might have gotten his Gangs of New York style of acting. Oh yeah. Now you add that
he lives as a vampire for 3 months in preparation for the role.
Like, what are you going to tell him? Not to wear a top hat? Of course he is.
In the swamp, even feeding off reptiles. Yeah.
I choose this rat myself.
Yep. I got to know what it's like.
So he, before this, had done like 3 movies in a row. And just like days before this is supposed to start, he drops out. He's just, I'm exhausted. I cannot do it. He does not act again for another 3 years. So it's not like it was an excuse. He literally had no juice left in the battery. And so this is where someone who had been circling this role for a while swoops in on the wings of Thetans or whatever. And that is the undying husk of Tom Cruise. Now, Warner Brothers had wanted to make movies with Cruise for a while, and he had spent a lot of his 80s days making hits at Paramount. And so Cruise had a lot of demands that Warner Brothers felt they needed to make in order to secure this deal, in order to make their production date. And so one of those was supposedly dampening down the homoeroticism of Lestat and Lewis's relationship, which I don't know if you all noticed, failed spectacularly.
That was tampered down.
Yeah, I was going to say the same exact thing.
I mean, was the original script involved like on-screen oral sex?
Yeah, it might have gone
Deep
somewhere.
Penetration. They're in a poly. I don't know what the hell's going on that was left on the table that they didn't take. But if that was the demand, it was not met. And he also wanted much of Louie's voiceover removed, but almost all of it ended up being reinstated once they got into the editing booth and saw that they needed it. So he lost on that account too. It should be noted. And if you, Gina, I will link your article in the show notes, but I think it is important that people read your take on it in the written word that you have. And it's a great article. But one of the things I loved about it was reading that Rice hated the idea of Tom Cruise's Lestat. Like, it burned her to the bone. And she's quoted before seeing the film, because it took a while for that to happen. She states, "Cruise is no more my vampire Lestat than Edward G. Robinson is Rhett Butler."
Yeah, she put out a page in Variety just complaining about how much she did not like this casting, and I get it. And as I mentioned in the article I wrote, he had never done anything like this before.
Right.
Like he was basically known as sort of like this, grinning all-American guy who done Top
Cocktail.
Gun and Rain Man and stuff like that. He was not at all the first, fifth, 10th, 20th choice anybody would have come up with for this role.
Yeah, you know what's interesting is that's the one and only outstanding thing from 1994 at 14 I remember hearing over and over again on the radio, is that exact thing, that one thing that she did not want him in that role. So that's how out there it was.
Yeah. She eventually was sort of forced by someone she knew to actually watch the movie, because they're like, everyone's telling her, I think you should actually watch this. I think you will like it. And when she does watch it and does eventually like it, she takes out full page ads in the trades and even Vanity Fair, basically stating, I was wrong. Cruise is great. This is a good version of Lestat.
Right.
I could admit when I was wrong. So good for her for coming around on it. But also, we have to consider how tied she is emotionally to the text of this book and her vision of it and what it has done for her, and how it's like King and The Shining to me. It's just one of those things where someone's going to say, like, this is deeply tied to you, so we're going to make it, also we're going to change some things. And the immediate reaction is, fuck no.
Yeah.
I'm not putting this on the level of The Shining, but I will say it is a very good adaptation of the source material, and Cruise does very, very well here.
Yeah, he really just defied everybody's expectations.
If your day sounds like,
we need the report ASAP.
You deserve Modelo. If you've persevered through, you deserve this rich golden lager with a crisp but refreshing taste. Or if you overcame.
2 more reps, 2 more.
You deserve this ice-cold reward. Modelo, the Remarkable Fighter. Drink responsibly. Beer imported by Crown Imports, Chicago, Illinois.
I think he finds a way to put himself into bigger characters in a way you don't actually expect. And when he's given that opportunity, which is rare, I think he relishes it and makes the most out of it. And there is a humor to him here that is rarely found in his other work.
Yeah, and there's also a let's just put it plainly, a queerness to his work that he's never shown anywhere else ever.
Yeah. I mean, he's certainly been cast in multiple romantic roles, but he always feels like, well, I am in love with you. It says here right in the script on page 116. Like,
yeah, I mean, he literally has better sexual chemistry. And I'm not trying to imply anything, about, think he's just not being public about. I'm just saying, acting wise, he has far more believable sexual chemistry with Brad Pitt than he does with his own wife in Eyes Wide Shut.
Wow, that's actually a very, very good point.
I just think this allowed him to get outside of himself, and he's just in a different place in his life. He's a Scientologist. He's not the Scientologist. And so I think there's a different place in him for him to go, and he finds that gear, and it really moves. One sobering note before we get on to the rest of the story, and that is River Phoenix is originally slated to play the journalist Malloy.
Oh,
and he dies again 4 weeks before this production is about to start. He dies outside the Viper Room in Hollywood. He was 23 fucking years old, and he is stolen from us because he just had to be in a band with Johnny Depp. Is it Johnny Depp's fault? Probably not. Am I still going to blame Johnny Depp? Yes. What am I going to play? Fucking Flea? Of course it's Johnny Depp. Anyways, Christian Slater filled in. He felt bad about winning the role in this way, ended up donating his salary to two of River's favorite charities. Christian Slater, as you all know, is my vocal double, only I sound worse and sound drunk. So there we go. Let's start getting into characters here. First, I want to talk about somebody we haven't discussed yet. And that is your boy, the one and the only Brad Pitt. In my opinion, this is not Pitt's finest moment.
No, he's very uncomfortable, and I don't know if it's the content or just he feels like he looks like he feels very silly in his frock coat and his little velvet hair ties and he looks like he's like a football player, forced to dress up, in like a Shakespeare production in a high school play.
There's a quiet indignity, and I'll put the emphasis on quiet in his performance here. And I have some insights into why.
Before we also, it's worth pointing out that he's probably also been whitewashed. Because the character is described in the book numerous times as being of Creole background, and the family they are slave owners, but they're just because they are wealthy. Yeah. But I am pretty sure that that was corrected. That has been corrected in the TV show. Yes, he is played by a black actor in that. But I don't think that. It was already going to be a hard enough sell with the, homoerotic subtext, let alone it being like an interracial homoerotic subtext.
Right. So Pitt, buys into this. He's coming off of A River Runs Through It. And before I think he's still got the same hair. Exact same hair. Like there's a shift that's about to happen. We'll get to it after I set this up, but he's been in a certain mode and he's trying to break out of it. And he feels like maybe something that gets him out of his own personage, like playing a vampire, might be the thing. But as soon as he signs on and as soon as he shows up to set, he hates being there. He kind of hates Cruz for stealing the attention off of him. And I'm quoting Brad here. He says, in the book, Louie is asking, who am I? Which was probably more applicable to me at the time. Am I good? Am I of the angels? Am I bad? Am I the devil? In the book, it's about all kinds of discovery. And then in the meantime, he has this Lestat character that he's entranced by and abhors in equal measure. And in the movie, they took the sensational aspects of Lestat and made that the real pulse of the film. And those things are very enjoyable and very good. But for me, there was just nothing to do. You just sit and watch. And folks, it shows.
Yeah, he just kind of mostly sits around and looks soulful.
Yes. He literally looks like who peed in my cornflakes for a fair amount of this movie's runtime.
Yeah, I remember seeing it, and I was very much, sort of very much had that critical eye of acting at sort of that point. I remember watching things solely through like a performance lens, and when I look at his career as a whole, it really does seem like it was sort of almost a transitional point, and because you really do see him, 12 Monkeys I think came after that. And that was like a big character move, and there was a little more commitment and a little bit more edge, and it really sort of led to him getting more comfortable, more relaxed, and became a better actor. There's a few actors you literally watch them become more skilled over the course of their career. It's like they get to learn how to act while making millions of dollars and being movie stars at the same time. It's brilliant. I mean, it's great.
You make a good point about bringing up 12 Monkeys. I think it's safe to say that between this and River Runs Through It, this was probably the last time he was mostly hired to look pretty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then where after that he was just like, well, ignore the fact that I'm devastatingly handsome while I dig into these character roles.
Exactly. You have a pre-1995 Pitt and you have a post-1995 Pitt. He's a beautiful object. He's a runway model. Look at those fucking abs. He has charisma, but he stumbles to find a way to expand how audiences and studios see him, and he's just not really sure how to do this. And then he comes into this, and he's at several points outacted by a 10-year-old. So
yeah, but she mops the floor with everybody.
She's fantastic. Yeah,
she's
amazing,
incredible. And we will get to her. Like, absolutely a fucking monster, a legendary performance. We stand, but. As you said, like in 1995, he has these two projects that absolutely shift his dynamic. He's playing the same instrument, but he's found completely different notes. The first one is Seven. And as we talked about in our 7 episode, like this is Fincher uses him as like a fulcrum for the audience. He allows our preconceptions of Pitt to manipulate them. Because in that role, like, yeah, he's attractive, but he's also a brash hick who brings multiple dogs to live with him in the second worst apartment in the city. But you'll learn to like him anyways. The same year, he also does 12 Monkeys, which is a rather brilliant performance that allows him to be completely unhinged, completely unlike what we knew him to be. And between those two performances and the box office performance of both of them, he's allowed to do all sorts of different things with his career. One big thing I wanted to say here before we move on is that Pitt hates the fuck out of night shoots. He called this production 6 months of fucking darkness. That's a direct quote. At what point, Pitt called the producer and legendary public beach occupier, David Geffen, and asked, what amount of money would it take for him to give Geffen to get taken off this film? And Geffen responds, $14 million. And Pitt's like, you know what? I'm going to stick it out.
Yeah, not there yet.
Not there yet. Just not worth it. I'll get through. And he does. Like, it was better for him to, play this particular groove when he knew that he was going to be able to change records after this. And so that's what he does.
Wonder what that was, like what it was about. It's very interesting. It makes you wonder, and maybe you'll talk about it later, but why such an epic movie that looked so beautiful with, a great cast around him, why he couldn't find comfort somehow in that situation. It really makes you wonder, like, yeah, I understand these elements are happening, but what an experience. I mean, I don't know. Goes to show you.
I mean, Gina, you spelled it out pretty well in your article, and I agree with you. Like Louie is the engine of the piece, but what he's hauling behind the engine is this crazy circus car of so many interesting things to watch that it feels like you're barely in the picture. And I think that just kind of crawls into his head at a certain point. He can't find the space to do what he wants. And what he wants to do, what his character is into, it's not going to live as large as Lestat or Claudia or Santiago or Armand. These are big deals. Like, he starts this movie as the ultimate wife guy who becomes the world's biggest sad boy.
Yeah.
He's like, it's underrated. However, it's important to understand the thrust of why Lestat picks Louie to begin with, because he has a death wish. And then Lestat is like, what if it was an undead wish? What do you think of that? And he doesn't have enough time to really think about it before he chooses. Louie, and there's a second big reason why Lestat chooses Louie, and that is Louie literally imports vampire food, on slave ships, like we all do. I hate to be humorous, but it's in the fucking movie. No one forced only the movie and the book forced me to talk about this. Louie literally imports vampire food. And so when his wife dies, he finds owning humans to make a living almost unbearable. And yet he doesn't stop doing it. It's tough out there for these new money dudes. Plantation owners truly were the tech bros of their time. So Louie, in a moment of crisis, meets Lestat. And to quote the bard, you can't put lipstick on a pig. And it's still a pig. And in this movie, Lestat is an unkillable pig who's mowing his way through the vast majority of this movie.
I mean, he's just having a good time.
Yes.
Look, no one is having no. I think Santiago has slightly more of a good time than Lestat, but generally speaking, no one's having a better time in this movie than Lestat.
We have found in covering vampire movies over the past year or so, Gregory, we've kind of discovered an interesting theme throughout the movies that we've covered. And I think this movie absolutely fits that particular, definition. And Lestat might be one of the better examples of why vampires are terrible planners, Gina.
Yes.
They don't have organizational charts. They never write things down. They don't think about things like the next night because they're practically unkillable. And they're like, I'll work it out in the end. And then somehow they find fucking daylight or someone stabs them with a stick of wood. But they're just, in movie after movie, they are terrible planners.
Yeah, it's a really, really good point. They would, all the time in the world, so much experience. And at the end of the day, you could, at least plan yourself into a safe situation. I mean, there's so many things you could take care of in order to seal the deal on that.
But, he looks at Louie and thinks, man, this guy is a gravy train. And the gravy is blood from the forced labor he imports regularly. And so for some reason, he thinks this very, very sad man who wants to die because his wife is dead will really fall in love with not dying ever because of all the constant murder you do, which is not a good plan. So I buy this dude as a heavy metal rock star, but, quote, guide to the vampire underworld is not on Lestat's CV. He is woefully underprepared for this role. You can dress Lestat up, you can take him to the finest brothels and fancy parties, and it's all just surface level. There's a difference between Lestat and Louie. Louie has had money for a little while. Lestat, you can tell, is just playing a role.
I mean, he's just a party guy.
Yeah.
He can make you a mean, blood martini.
he can squeeze the best rats in town. He's rash, he's rude. He puts a doily up to his mouth when he laughs, like he's fucking French and shit. I don't understand it, but
I'm pretty sure that he is, in fact, French and shit.
I agree with you, Gina.
I thank God Tom Cruise did not attempt a French accent.
Oh God!
But I am pretty sure he is in fact French.
Yeah, and as a result, Cruz as Lestat just runs away with a lot of this movie because any action any other character takes ends up being a reaction to him. Even after they think he's dead, Louie and Claudia operate in ways that they believe Lestat never would. So he's still a presence in the film even when he's not around.
It's funny, when in the article that I wrote, I compare their relationship, Louis Lestat and Claudia, to being, and this is really a credit to Neil Jordan that this works as well as it does. Mm-hmm. But their relationship is sort of parents and child, but also almost a sort of like polyamorous triad.
Yeah.
Where because she's basically like the vampire kid from Near Dark. Where she has a child's body but like an adult's needs, let's say, for lack of a better term, and they're very frustrated by that. So you've got a lot of very loaded interactions, particularly between Louie and Claudia. Where she's definitely in love with him, he's kind of a little in love with her. But, she's also, in the body of a 10-year-old.
Yeah, it's an interesting relationship. And of course, knowing the backstory of it, you can definitely see what Rice is attempting to explore in this, and understanding the frailty of life and what would it be like if it didn't have to end. It just went on and on. How would that affect you over time? Like it is a vampire movie. There's a big idea thing happening in this film that is rare for vampire films. I didn't ask this before, Gregory, but before we go on to this next section, like, what was your experience prior to seeing Interview with vampire movies in general? Was it something you'd seen a bunch of?
That was that period all the way. I'd say from the time I was 9-10 years old, I was sort of inappropriately shown lots, like all the greats, all the vampire movies, everything coming out. So big horror movie fan, and always saw vampire movies and held them up to the highest, like all the way back to Fright Night and Near Dark. When you mentioned Near Dark, Gina, that was the atmosphere, the texture of that movie, Catherine Bigelow, like just that being on television is just very very visceral, like that period of vampire movies through the 80s and 90s, which I was thinking about before we talked. This was sort of a departure from a lot of sort of what I think I had always felt, I'd gotten from vampire movies growing up. So it was, it was a larger production. Yes. And, the production design and everything. And it kind of was more in this larger than life studio world. But, yeah, every possible one, I would say. Anything that sort of, was noted, I saw. So it was very interesting to see, to sort of see this. And it was the biggest novel at the time. Like at 14 years old, like I really wish my dad had the books lying around, and I really wish I had the interest to actually read them. But at that point I was doing the Sparks notes with school. So, I wish I had just been more of an academic, but I just wasn't. But when I saw the movie, I was like, that's why it's interesting to hear you guys talk about the novel. There's so much that's different, and there's so much more detail, especially in these characters. It's fascinating for me to hear, because as I'm hearing it, I'm like, oh my God, the layers that this would have added if they had chose to leave some of this in as well.
Yeah. They only have so much real estate in which to build up.
Right.
I think they take the best of what can work for a film adaptation and really make the most of it. Obviously, in terms of scale, this is scaled up as a reaction to Bram Stoker's Dracula. And there's a sort of race at the time to have big, classy productions of horror films. That changes in 1996 with Scream, but this is like big studios trying to exploit horror in an absolutely different way. It was the first version of elevated horror. And the other big difference here, because like romance has always been a component of certain vampire movies. Certainly that starts with 1931's Dracula and the Broadway show before that. But in those situations, the vampire is primarily a hot stove you shouldn't touch, but it's just so hot you got to anyways. And in the 5 years previous to Interview, vampires recovering from the early 80s silly phase that starts with Fright Night, which is still a comedy. Lost Boys, still very comedic, but they are both parts of the source code of making them cool again. And you've mentioned a couple that definitely, have a lot of stuff, but you have wild swings like, Vampire's Kiss and Death by Temptation and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And then, of course, Bram Stoker's Dracula with its hyper romanticism. And then Interview gets the green light. And what makes Interview predominantly different? And I tried to find something that equated to this, and I didn't really, outside of maybe Andy Warhol's Dracula. And that this is the first mainstream film that absolutely is like, this movie's about vampires talking to vampires about vampire shit. Humans are around, but they are a food source. Yeah. They are a shrimp buffet.
You've got like
the main point of this is vampires.
You've got little Tandy Way Newton is like, she just kind of making eyes and meekly walking around the mansion. I'm like, hey, I know her.
Is it the first one with the point of view is from the vampire? To some degree?
The first one where first major movie.
Yeah.
Because even like Gina, the 82 movie the Whitley Strieber movie
Hunger.
The Hunger.
So even The Hunger has a human who even though we start with vampires, it's like this human meets these vampires we've already met and then kind of becomes her story.
Right.
And that is the predominant view with very few exceptions.
Yeah, I mean, you would say, I would say another one would probably be like Martin, but Martin is such an unusual take on vampire movies anyway, that it's its whole own separate thing.
Exactly. And so I think this holds a unique view that hadn't been exploited to this degree, this blockbuster scale at the very least. And without this, now certainly the romanticism of Bram Stoker's Dracula is a component of this, but when you add Interview with the Vampire, it is a direct line to what we end up getting with Twilight and Vampire Chronicles and all the YA-ness interpretation of vampires thereafter. It comes from this. This is, oh my God, it kind of sucks to be a vampire in such a specific way. Mm-hmm. And that longing, that historic back view, all of that kind of comes from those two movies germinating in people's heads and coming out in their own unique fashion.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Progressive loves to help people make smart choices. That's why they offer a tool called Auto Quote Explorer that allows you to compare your Progressive car insurance quote with rates from other companies. So you save time on the research and can enjoy savings when you choose the best rate for you. Give it a try after this episode at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
After the end of a good fight, you deserve an ice-cold reward. Modelo, you put in the hours, the energy, the tough labor, because you know the bigger the fight, the better the reward. Modelo, the mark of the fighter. Drink responsibly. Beer imported by Crown Imports, Chicago, Illinois.
So what we have here is really focusing on what vampires want and need. And there's an obvious sexuality at play throughout, but then you come into contact with something, Gina, that you also brought up in your article, and that vampires get all the penetration they need with their fangs. So this movie sort of connotes that the connection is really what vampires use as intimacy rather than anything else with each other. They don't want the sort of to tag a human along. They want a connection with someone else who actually understands what their day-to-day, night to night is like.
Basically want a life partner, but an eternal life partner.
Exactly. So Louie needs blood to live-ish, but he wants connection with someone who understands his desire to like know more about life and why is he still here and what is the meaning of the cycle of cruelty he's chained to. And will that special someone come along with the patience to hear him talk so fucking slowly?
while occasionally trying a New Orleans accent.
Oh boy.
It's
Brad.
This is one of those situations where I understand you tried, it didn't work, and you're like, this isn't something we need. We need to focus on other stuff.
Yeah.
Conversely, for Lestat, life is an exchange. He gets something. Well, more often than not, he takes it. Louie is not that transactional, which once again is weird for a slave owner. But Lestat positions himself as a guide, like a lot of things that Lestat projects, he actually lacks the tangible experience to educate anyone else on, besides how to squeeze a rat. Once again, really good at this.
Patrick, Gino, is it ever explained in detail, or are there any detailed notes on why it is that they can get by on animal blood, but is it just the human blood is just more nutritious or delicious? Like, what is the situation there?
I don't, honestly, it's been years since I read the books. I think that's just general vampire.
Just because they kind of hated it, they're like, I'll take it, but it's just not that good. But I could live off it. But
I think that's just general like vampire lore.
It is,
that you just sometimes you just have to get by by eating animals and all.
Right, but the top grade is the human, though.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, it is very much the whole milk.
Yeah,
of
there you go.
Vampire lore. Like you can eat cereal with skim, but
that's not the same. It's not the same.
Yeah, and the blood of the dead is just like someone handing you a big old carton of sour milk.
Yeah, see that moment. That is one of the most outstanding moments. I just remember. You remember that viscerally just because of what follows. That incredible sequence where he gets his throat cut. But man, something about that, you're like, I get it. You're like, dead blood bad.
Jordan is really able to put people in a room, and this is a movie where you're not outside as much. And for whatever reason, he is able to put all these various characters in whatever the combination they're in inside a room and really make their acting choices pop and sizzle. He juices all the orange he possibly can.
Oh, those scenes were like theater. A lot of those scenes, they were like theater scenes. They really played out, and you could really tell like the blocking all in those rooms, especially with that scene for sure. It's beautiful.
I think he's turned on and excited by Grand Guignol theater and the idea of not just staging a version of it, but having that as a thread he tries to pull all the way through the movie really does pay off.
Yeah.
And with all this stuff going on, I think now you start to see why Pitt ended up kind of disliking his experience and the opportunity he had with this movie, because he's not able to get as much on screen. Cruise is practically in a Kids in the Hall sketch at moments of this movie, and it is very entertaining.
It really is. I mean, he's just like, he's making the most of this role. It's almost like he's sort of new in the back. And I'm not saying that Tom Cruise has not done other, quote unquote, daring roles. I mean, he would go on to play like the kind of woman-hating motivational speaker in Magnolia, and then the cameo he did in Tropic Thunder, all of which were considered out of character roles for him. But he never really did anything like this again. Yeah. And I feel like he sort of went into it like, this might be my only shot at doing something like this. So I'm going to, I'm going to give 150% to it. And he really does.
He wanders into this and you feel them like, here's Lestat. And he's like, okay, they're not going to serve this up to me very often. So I am going to make the most of it. Whereas Pitt has Louie, who's a drag and not the good kind. And, either he should have had some idea that the character wasn't what he wanted it to be, or someone on his team and management should have read the fucking Vampire Chronicles, of which there were 4 books at this point, and told him at no point in this franchise does Louie show up at the vampire equivalent of Cheers, and the entire bar yells, Louie, like he's going to dip his balls into it or something. And so, like, as a result, he's kind of lost in the sauce here. Like, he's obviously a big part of this movie, and everyone else really can't springboard unless he's the surface that they all kind of stand on or, react off of or interact with. He's doing what he needs to do, but I do think it is the least thanked role in the entire affair.
I mean, what does Tom Cruise say, right? He's like, poor Louie. He's always just saying, poor Louie. I guess that's sort of,
Still whining.
Whining, always whining. That's actually funny because it really does seem like a couple arguing. And then those violins kick in and that sort of dramatization, it does get very funny. And there's straight up jokes at certain points. I mean, Tom Cruise, literally, the way some of those lines are delivered, especially when he reappears. Yeah. Very, very.
They are sketch level interpretations, but again, it's not like they bump against anything in the movie.
Yes, it works.
The vibes here between Louie and Lestat, regardless of anything else, are hot. And then they turn real cold, real quick, which would be fine for winter, but not something that makes an eternity worth living. So if this is a really difficult starter marriage, probably the least best thing you can do is bring a kid into it to make it better. And that's where we get to Claudia, everybody. There can't be enough said about how good Kirsten, Dunst is in this movie. She's 10 here, and she runs circles around nearly everyone else who's in a scene with her. So much so you think she'd end up with a gold medal before she gets an Oscar. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, she it's like she stepped out of the book. Yeah. Like, I mean, the primary difference is in the book, Claudia is actually about 6, which is poignant because that is the age that Anne Rice's daughter passed away.
Right.
So, I mean, for obvious reasons, they kind of had to age her up a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then, subsequently in the TV show, she is even older than that. I think she's supposed to be like an older teenager because it's, you kind of can't do that sort of thing anymore where you have an adult and a child in this sort of very loaded relationship. You can say, oh, well, she's actually like, an adult in a child's body, but like, no, but it's still, a 10-year-old actress. So I think that they made her like an older teenager in the show, which again kind of takes away from the element of the story. But I mean, I get why they had to do it.
You adapt material for the medium that it's going to go into. And you can have a 10-year-old here because the production only lasts a certain amount of months. A TV show that could go on 5-6 years, you have to really plan that out. And there's no way you're getting anyone very young who's going to look that way for much longer. My kid was 5-6 when he entered middle school and came out 6'2". So
different person.
And so what you do here is you cast the best person for the part, and Kirsten Dunst absolutely is the best person. She's like a fucking buzzsaw. She slices through every scene that she's in. She transforms into a monstrous adult with a child's lack of personal control. And it's great getting everything you want when you're a kid. But when you're stuck in that form forever, as you guys said, like dolls and dresses get real tired real quick. And before too long, Claudia pretty quickly sees through Lestat's bullshit. And so it reaches a point where Louie is the person who actually listens to her and she has an emotional connection with. And so Claudia is like, I know what to do. Let's poison this motherfucker, slice his throat. And then she nudges Louie to help her, dump his carcass in the swamp, only for him to drag himself back out, worse for wear. And then Louie does what he does multiple times in this movie, and that is solve problems with fire.
He burns. What is he? He burns he burns the entire place down. Curtains first, right?
He burns his mansion down in
with
New
the
Orleans.
candlestick.
He burns Lestat. And then later he goes to Paris and burns the catacombs of the vampire coven there.
That's right.
1, 2, 3.
That's right.
They followed the script. Like Robert McKee's story, check mark. They got it, everybody. And so, yeah, I love Claudia as a character. I love Kirsten Dunst in this role. You know, you go from, you know, fuck them kids to these kids will fuck you up. And it drives a wedge between Louie and Lestat that would have eventually gotten there, but maybe not as fast. So with Lestat, as far as we know, out of the picture, Louie and Claudia, you know, head off for a Euro trip, only murdering a small portion of people on their transatlantic cruise, as you do. And, you know, they get there, they do it all. Leaning Tower of Pisa, Alps from the Sound of Music, smash plates in Greece, you know, all the shit. And finally, they find some vampires in the City of Lights, baby. And now we're down to like our last few characters here. We've got Santiago. And just quickly, let's get Stephen Ray's Santiago out of the way because like he's a delightful imp and all, but we never really dig into what makes him work.
No, he's not. He's just here to have a good time.
Yeah. He's styled like Lon Chaney from London After Midnight. He's got a top cat. He's got the top cat. Yeah, he's swallowing whole fish and pulling out bones. That's Santiago,
he's
baby.
Exiting stage left.
He's got a top hat. He's got a cape. He's got a lot of pointy teeth. And they have that really nice 360-degree bridge set that lets him walk up walls like he's a dapper Spider-Man. He's very into vampire rules that Claudia and Louie learn maybe 5 minutes before they're held accountable of them in night court. Insert baseline here. But like he's a side character due to the main thrust of the film. So speaking of thrust, let's get into the one and only Armand, played by Antonio Banderas, and a wig.
Oh boy. let's talk a moment about Armand as a character.
Sure.
Armand in the book is an 18-year-old Russian.
Oh,
yeah, he's a ginger twink
with red hair, and well, Antonio Banderas has the red hair.
He has he has a red-haired wig in this?
He is wearing a red wig.
No, I do not.
It is color time. This movie is very color timed into, you know, what the 90s and early 2000s love, brown and green. It is not very red forward, but there are red accents to that wig. Whatever they lapped onto his head, whatever they lace fronted to him, does not really benefit him. But what Antonio Banderas has is that he smolders. I hate to sound trite, but the man smolders. He's hotter than a smoker making burnt ends.
Yeah,
I think days.
Yeah, this and Desperado were like his introduction to American audiences.
Yeah. And this is his second Hollywood movie after the Mambo Kings, where I might add, he learned his lines phonetically because he did not speak English.
Man, when he came out, he got big.
Finally, Brad Pitt is able to muster some sexual chemistry with someone.
True. Now, this is, I think, is really when things start to churn. Like, for as much as the flirting goes on and the camp factor is high between Louie and Lestat, when Armand enters the picture, all of a sudden, the connections get real hot and heavy. I mean, there's a lot of face grabbing. I'm not saying that it's better than if they were actually, you know, kissing and doing all the things we desperately want them to do. But for the constrictures of the time and the budget and the Hollywood stodgy ways, this works. Like,
yeah, there's a lot of meaningful stares.
The point is that he's a quality rebound for Louie. He's giving things that Louie wants. He's offering vampire secrets and a coffin built for two. And yes, he's yet another old vampire who turns out doesn't really know that much about vampire origins and stuff. But fuck it, let's snuggle.
It's kind of a testament to to the directing and the acting, because I remember seeing it and getting that sort of clear vibe, especially about that relationship and about what was going on there. And it was just, it was very sort of visceral. I was like, okay, I know what's going on here, but did they did it in a somewhat subtle way, right? Am I just remembering it as a kid? Was there anything overt?
There's face grabbing.
That's
there's
it.
Longing.
I mean, I could certainly see that. Like, I would think that a younger person wouldn't quite get what's happening, because it's all in. I mean, I don't know if you call it subtext, but yeah, it's like I said, it's a lot of meaningful looks.
Yeah, yes.
Armand comes into the picture, and Claudia kind of takes a look at the room, starts to do the math. And she brings a human woman named Madeline that she demands Louie turn into a vampire for her.
Oh, yeah.
Claudia has needs. And if Louie wants to deeply fall in love with that beautiful Spaniard's eyes and terrible lace front wig, she's got to look out for herself. And so Louie complies. And I think the scene that is the absolute nadir for Brad Pitt in this movie is what happens afterwards, where he's luxuriating on a balcony, just laying on his back, having a scene with Kirsten Dunst, not looking at her at all, going, whatever human remained inside of me is gone with that act. Okay.
In the moonlight, looking into the moonlight.
Yeah.
A little bit of that.
Thank God the movie picks up after this, because if it were more of this, I don't think it would have been the hit it ended up becoming. This moment really doesn't last long, because they're both snatched up by Santiago's vampire showcase and immediately sentenced to death in night court. Louie is sealed in a coffin in the Paris catacombs, while Madeline and Claudia are placed in a well with a view of the sun.
That was horrifying. I remember that. It was really disturbing. I remember just as it approached, and just, you don't, especially, you see a movie, it's not like now where sort of, I don't know, you're focused on that movie, and you're like, there's, they're not going to kill that character, right? That character is not going to die. And then it's just this slow, painful awfulness.
Regardless of the fact that you can intellectually understand that Kirsten Dunst is not a 10-year-old. She's still a 10-year-old who is about to die and is clutching to another person. And that person's like, oh, I don't want that to happen to me or you. And
yeah, what a bummer too, right? She just got turned. Didn't she get grabbed as she was turning? I remember that, right?
Yes.
Oh my God.
She is basically finishing the conversion on the way.
What a conflict. I wonder if she even had a moment where she was like, I'm feeling it. And then the sun.
She doesn't even get to do anything cool.
Nothing cool.
So it's a good news, bad news situation, because Armand, against the wishes of his coven, frees Louie, because you can't let a piece of ass like that rot behind a wall. Sorry, Edgar Allan Poe. And Louie goes on a rampage after finding that Claudia and her new afterlife partner are very, very ashy. Louie gets his revenge on the vampire troupe by setting most of them on fire. Kale's surprise. And slicing Santiago in two with a scythe.
That's right.
And then eventually Louie comes back to America, finds a swamp-fried version of Lestat, who's now afraid of low-flying helicopters. Okay. A lot of drama out of you.
Bright lights, low-flying helicopters.
It's a big deal. Like anything above a candle, I don't like, and is strange. And then Louie decides to move to San Francisco and spill the beans to some fucking rando, which brings us to Malloy. This is pretty much Christian Slater delivering prime Christian Slater to camera.
Oh yeah.
He smokes. He speaks like I do. He wears a vest over a t-shirt in a way I hope never comes back.
Oh man.
He looks appropriate. He looks appropriately startled.
Right. He reacts well. He's a good scene partner. He's barely there. But when he is there, I feel like, again, the same thing with Armand. This is where Louie kind of comes alive a little bit. He has a different tone. He's bouncing things off of him. And when he implores Louie to turn him into a vampire. He is shunned. He gets in his convertible and takes off. And then he dies in the backseat of a car while on the Golden Gate Bridge. That's right. The character we last saw be afraid of bright lights is a real Michael Myers, because all of a sudden that motherfucker knows how to drive.
Oh my God.
Getting those nighttime driving lessons.
Yeah, well, where did he go to driving school?
Is the implication that he was living
it up on fucking YouTube? It didn't exist. So
was he living in that
seriously
swamp the whole time? Is that the idea? Like for hundreds of years? Is that what was going on?
He was sitting in the empty, remains of that place, just huddled in a blanket, just eating rats and gathering strength, I suppose.
Planning.
And then planning, now that he knows that Louie's back in America, is like, I'm doing it. I'm getting on that treadmill. I'm going to Stairmaster, and by Stairmaster, I mean suck blood, my way back into health. And he does. And then he goes to a learn to drive place that's open 24 hours a day, learns how to drive a car.
That's true. That
is the most fantastical moment in this entire movie. And it's placed in the section that makes the most sense right at the end, when Guns N' Roses start playing a cover song.
That's right.
One of their few before they break up and not make a new album for years and years and years.
He turns it up. He turns that volume right up. He's ready to rock. He's ready to roll.
Big hair metal fan.
Yep, driving right towards the future.
He is discovering something new, something that he'll take up in Queen of the Damned, where he becomes not a heavy metal star, but a new metal vocalist.
You have to evolve. It's all about evolving. Yep.
He could have brought something back, but talk about a difference in tone and execution when it comes to the music in this movie to Korn in Queen of the Damned, where the best musical performance is Aaliyah and she doesn't sing.
That's right. That's right. She was in that.
Aaliyah. Goddamn. What was taken from us? So does anyone have anything they absolutely need to say about Interview with the Vampire before we turn off the tape recorder?
Hearing all this great information from the two of you, just all the details has been fascinating, because I can just say, remembering watching that movie, it's really interesting to hear you, Patrick, talk about sort of all the different revisions on the script and the years that it was sort of in development, and then it got sort of reworked. You end up, it's rare that you end up with something that works on that level with that kind. Yet at the end, it seems like a sort of a classic to me. One of the classic movies of that time. That's just fantastic and unique, and probably only could have become what it became if it hadn't gone through all of those different phases. It seems like.
True. Sometimes time is not on your side, and you let it cook and it comes out the right way. Yeah. I think they found the right people at the right time.
Right.
Gina?
Yeah, this came out during a run of pretty spectacular and very different vampire movies. You have this, you have Bram Stoker Dracula, you have 2 years later From Dusk Till Dawn.
Yeah.
And then you have a couple smaller vampire movies. You have Nadia, you have The Addiction, all of which took very, very different approaches. And I think that this one is delightfully campy. And I think that the lion's share of that can go again to Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
Who, it's disappointing that he has yet to have this much fun with the role. He does good villains, and it is because he has kind of a sinister edge to him.
Yeah.
There's something a little fake about his smile. There's something a little dead behind the eyes. I'm not at all surprised that Christian Bale said that he based his performance of Patrick Bateman on him. So he is better at playing villains than he probably realizes, and thinks that. But you look at this, you look at Collateral,
of course,
so good,
where like those are his, and again, Magnolia, which he gradually does a turn to not exactly a good guy turn, but slightly less of a bad guy. But he's more believable at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And I just okay, that's kind of who you are. It's a secret villain, and of course I don't think he realizes it. Yeah, but those are the kind of roles where he really ends up shining.
Sometimes you need to put a mask on to reveal what's underneath.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Right, exactly.
Like that. So we can't end this without choosing our deathventure, and that's where we decide of the deaths in this motion picture. If we were forced to die in one of those ways, which one would it be and why? Up for bid, we have bitten by a vampire and drained of all your blood, your throat slit, your neck snapped, set on fire, or cut in two by a scythe. It doesn't seem like a lot considering the amount of dead bodies, but a couple of those deaths turn out to not be deaths. So we have to take legitimate on-screen deaths.
Are we also doing burnt by the sun?
Oh, yes, you're right. Scorched by the sun into ash. Thank you for the reminder, Gina. Gregory, what say you?
You know what? I'm gonna imagine that vampires are they're incredibly strong. We know that. So that neck snap, that's gonna be quick. That's like a tiger jumping on you and just sort of ending it quickly. So it would be between that, getting drained of your blood. It would depend if while that's happening, you're sort of numbed to what's going on. Maybe there's something in those fangs that sort of, I don't know, puts you in a little la la land. But my gut's telling me just make it quick, get the neck snapped.
Yep. It's a worthy choice, one we've made many times. Now, Gina, what do you have up for bid?
I mean, I would say that being turned to ash in the sun would be very on brand for me, because I very much burn when I'm in the sun. But also that took a while. I don't like that. And I also would not want to have a child with me. That seems terrible and nightmarish and horrible. But I also do struggle with occasional low blood pressure. Mm-hmm. And I did compare it to what I imagined it felt like to be drained of all your blood. Yeah. And I mean, it doesn't feel good, but at the same time, you also feel kind of sleepy. And so I'm like, you know what? That's probably, it seems like a fairly glamorous way to go. So
I would say the way it's portrayed here, yes.
Yeah, I mean, you've got that one. It's almost kind of like a menage a trois, and I'm like, all right, okay.
All right. I'm down with that.
It's like, that makes sense. But yeah, I think I'm going to actually go with drain of all my blood.
Nice.
Yeah,
it's a good choice.
I agree, Gina. I think it's the way to go. It's a little sleepy time, and whatever pain you have is very, very short. And then you're off to La La Land, and as long as you don't wake up again, that's all she wrote. And so that just about does it. But of course, before we do anything else, I'd like to tell people that we have a Patreon. We have lots of bonus episodes you can check out. Join us and give us questions for Chat by Chat. We have commentaries. We have bonus episodes. It's a great time if you're into the show. And of course, follow us on socials and rate and review. It helps us be seen and heard by more people on these here internets. Now, Gregory,
yes.
Why don't you tell people what you have going on and where they can find it?
Yeah, right now we are finishing up the 4th season of our show. My friend, director, writer, Sean Cunningham. We have the 4th season of Greg and LA coming out on 800 Pound Gorilla Media. They are releasing the first 3 seasons right now. Seasons 1 and 2 are out on their YouTube channel, so just be sure to follow. Check out the episodes on 800poundgorillamedia.com. Greg and LA series is the handle for Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff. And I'm the Gregory Lay on Instagram. But we'll have a release date, season 4, December 8th.
Excellent. That's 2 days from when this episode lands. Gina, where can people see you and read from you on these here internets?
I write about movies and television and pop culture on my newsletter, GinaWatchesThings.substack.com. I am taking a sort of break from social media, but I am still on there under Gina Does Things.
Yes, you'll find us there. Maybe not as often. I don't know. When this comes out, who's to say what it'll be? But whatever. That's neither here nor there. And so... that just about does it, folks. But don't worry, the body count will continue for myself, for Gina, and for Gregory. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Kroger Delivery makes it easy to do your holiday shopping in a jingle. There might be a lot on your to-do list, but thanks to Kroger Delivery, you can get everything you need delivered straight to your door at the same great prices you'd find in store. Our refrigerated trucks always ensure that your groceries arrive fresh. And right now, you can save $20 on your first order of $75 or more and get free delivery with a Boost membership. Restrictions apply. See site for details. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
After the end of a good fight, you deserve an ice-cold reward. Modelo, you put in the hours, the energy, the tough labor, because you know the bigger the fight, the better the reward. Modelo, the mark of the fighter. Drink responsibly. Beer imported by Crown Imports, Chicago, Illinois.